Objectively, there's a lot of good news for Ukraine today. Well, today, last couple of days, we're going to go over a lot of what's going on the battlefield. We're going to start with this, though, because this is an interesting starting point. Top Russian General Gerasimov, troops advancing on virtually all fronts. Okay, well, I mean, he's got to do that. This is his job. He is going to say, we're winning. Here's how we're winning and why we're winning. But the reality on the ground might be a little different. Look at this number, 1150. Do you remember the last time you've seen 1150? It's been a while. 0 tanks, 1 armored fighting vehicle, 17 artillery systems, 44 vehicles and fuel tanks. These numbers are all very low, right? In fact, non-existent for tanks. But 1150, something's happening on the battlefield. Highest casualties since June 21st. Today is September 19th. So there has been a tick up, right, since June 21st, and most engagement since June 14th. So something's changed. Okay, across direction, Russian invaders led 61 assaults. Okay, so that number correlates with this high 1150 over here, and we keep, looking at Kursk just because that's the high water mark on the battlefield. Now, remember the bunny ears? The bunny ears were kind of a thing where the Russians seemed to be, making some real headway here, and then they got cut off here, and then they got cut off here, and they might be getting cut off here, and they're even working on cutting off here. Look at what's going on right here, like this area. So it looks like Ukraine's having some success. Zelensky, not yesterday, but the day before, was at the command post of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade. I greatly value this kind of dialogue with our military, he said. There will certainly be some decisions on all these matters. Thank you for the meeting. I'm grateful to the warriors for defending Ukraine. We will do absolutely everything to ensure our warriors have the maximum support to carry out their mission. And then he's talked about this. The armed forces of Ukraine have launched a counteroffensive in the Donetsk sector, and that's what we're talking about here with the bunny ears and such. Okay, 7 settlements have already been cleared of occupying forces in the areas of Pokrovsk and Dobropilya. By the way, just in Pokrovsk alone, more than 1,300 Russians have been eliminated in recent weeks. President Zelensky announced this today. He arrived at the front at the Donetsk region and met with the soldiers taking part in the Dobropilya counteroffensive operation. So, yeah, things are going. Ukraine liberated 7 settlements in Donetsk, inflicting 2,500 plus Russian losses in the last few weeks. According to Zelensky, reports show a reversal of Russia's summer gains around Pokrovsk, where Moscow concentrated nearly 100,000 soldiers. Now, those 100,000 soldiers are still there. Let's not fool ourselves. Here's Colonel Valentin Montko, head of Ukraine's Assault Troops Command, says that Russian forces near Dobropilya have been cut off for 3 weeks. 3 encirclements have formed. That's what I was just showing you here, the multiple encirclements. A small one near Kucherev Yar, a medium one, and a large one previously unreported, likely on the Razin-Rosniki line. Excuse me for slaughtering that name. Waiting for more confirmation about that. So it's happening. Igor Komanetsky, a so-called advisor to the occupational administration in Donetsk, complained on Russian TV, quote, "These Ukrainians are beasts. They've created a point system. They hit our soldiers and equipment, and then they use these points to get even more weapons to hit us harder." Well, that is true. They do use this point system, and the point system is geared to give them, like if they hit, a tank or they hit some kind of howitzer or something, they get extra points from the drones in order to buy more stuff for that particular unit. They've gamified it in that way. Heavy fighting in Kupiansk and Dobropilya access. An overview of the daily events, Russian invasion of Ukraine. The AFU struggles to push back Russians near Kupiansk, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But there is success near Dobropilya, and refineries are burning. This was yesterday. No refinery struck last night as far as I'm aware, which is why I'm shifting my attention now to the front line. And what's on the front line is pretty amazing. The war's potential largest battle is forming around Pokrovsk, and that is true. I mean, there's 100,000 Russians massed there. But can they actually use the mass the way that armies have historically used mass when there's the minefield in the sky that is drones? But nobody can map where opposing forces actually are. Drone surveillance and infiltration have dissolved front lines into chaos. What we're seeing isn't battle, it's warfare fundamentally transformed. That's exactly right. I'm not as scared of 100,000 Russians as I would have been 3 years ago massed on a border, because you can't use mass the same way. Or you can, but you're going to get totally destroyed in the process. You might take the ground, but you'll lose those 100,000 in the process. Russian sources report things are heating up in the Sumy axis. That's in the north, the Sumy axis, where they've had just a terrible run. They've been all but destroyed up there. Ukrainian forces are pushing harder near Andrivka and Yunkivka, reinforcing their assault units and using drones to disrupt Russian supply lines. Troops of the 810th Brigade have been implicated in war crimes. This is in Kursk. So Ukrainian forces hit Russian Marines base in Kursk. That's in Russia, and hit these accused of war crimes, including the execution of Ukrainian POWs. According to Ukrainian reports, the Russians suffered heavy losses. Ammunition depots, storage base, concealed sites for weapons and equipment were destroyed. And you can see some of the booms in the background there. Okay, Russian forces filmed moving equipment along the so-called Road of Death in Kursk region. Footage shows dozens of vehicles, mostly Ural trucks, but also ISDM Zimdeli systems, UAZ vans, Ladas, and other scrap metal grade transports. Like, they're just sitting there destroyed as they're just riding along the road. I mean, yeah. Russian troops were also ordered to kill all civilian men aged 18 to 60. Women and children were to be used as human shields if necessary. Where is this happening? Well, Ukraine blocks Russian advance in Kupiansk, warns of war crimes, orders against civilians. So Kupiansk. Reports claiming that Russian forces have reached the center of Kupiansk are false. Ukraine's operational command, Dnipro, said in a comment on RBC Ukraine on September 17th. That's just 2 days ago. Rumors began circulating online that fighting was underway in the heart of the Ukrainian eastern city. Still, those claims do not correspond to reality, according to a lieutenant colonel spokesperson for the command. Ukrainian troops have already damaged and flooded a gas pipeline Russian forces were using to move soldiers toward the city's outskirts. I talked about that just the other day. Information about combat in the city center is not true. The occupiers are operating in northern Kupiansk. That is true. Captured Russian soldiers told Ukrainian forces that they had entered the city in small groups of 2 to 9 men, some wearing uniforms, others dressed as civilians. Russian troops were also ordered to kill civilians, men aged 18 to 60. Women and children were to be used as human shields. So that's what was going on in Kupiansk. Now, by the way, who's ordering this kind of thing? Well, it turns out that this guy here is the commander in charge. BBC reports that Russian offensive near Kupiansk is led by Lieutenant General Sergei Sorodzenko, a former Ukrainian officer who defected after the 2014 annexation of Crimea. Once a commander of Ukraine's 36th Coastal Defense Brigade, he allegedly urged others to surrender and join Russia. Just a week after the fake referendum, he received a Russian passport, rose swiftly through the ranks. He now commands forces fighting near Kupiansk. Yeah, it's like that. Ukrainian drones struck a critical railway communications facility in Rostov, and we're seeing that footage. Oh, by the way, sometimes, the joke is a careless cigarette, right? Since the Moskva went under, there was that kind of reporting. Well, this might have actually been a careless cigarette. We're not sure yet. Clustered losses in Zaporizhzhia region. Someone had a bad smoke break, and 18 Russian officers were wiped out. According to the I Want to Live project, at the end of August, someone set dry grass on fire near the command post of Russia's 35th Army in the village of Vorysinka. The fire quickly spread to the buildings and the dugouts. Heavy smoke filled the headquarters, and the Russians suffocated from carbon monoxide. So there was a fire lit. We don't know if it was a careless cigarette or just what it was, but a fire was the cause of this. Okay, Lancet interception by 2 drone operators. This is what you call frag steal. This is Ukrainian drone. Yep, there you go. That's pretty amazing to see. Look, we'll watch that again. It's only like 10 seconds long. So this is a Lancet drone, a Russian reconnaissance drone. Here is a Ukrainian UAV coming down, trying to get near enough to blow it up, and that's what they did. 100 days in command. With 100 days in command, the unmanned forces, 7,859 unique enemy targets are destroyed. Like that's what's in the 100 days report. So Ukrainian drone forces want to grow from 2.2% of the military to 5% of the military. In 100 days, they've done all that. Brovdy says they're scaling up or he's stepping down. Like, we got to do this. By the way, I did this extra report on the on drones based on all the data that was there. For every dollar they spend on drones, they get $111 return on investment. That's incredible. Okay, Russia is fortifying occupied Crimea with cutting-edge air defense systems, even more than oil refineries. It's like so oil refineries really aren't protected like they should be, and they're just kind of sitting ducks. I mean, they don't have this kind of protection. The Ukrainian Navy spokesperson said Moscow concentrated its S-500 systems on the peninsula worth $600 million. When those go up, that's going to be a really bad day. But that they have to move them there is showing you how effective Russia has been, or ineffective Russia has been, or how effective Ukraine has been in actually destroying these things. Ukrainians, now over 60, can now voluntarily join the military under a new law passed by the Ukrainian parliament. They're allowing that. They're not drafting. Those would be 2 very, very different pictures. Service requires a 1-year contract, approval from commanders, and fitness assessment by military medical commission. So they can do that, and apparently there are enough volunteers that they had to pass a law. Russia plans to toughen penalties for desertion, going AWOL and dodging service after a government law panel approved a draft bill, state news outlet TASS reported. So I talked about that in the past, where Russians were deserting in record numbers. Looks like President Zelensky has a lot of cars, says Ben Hodges, former general. I think he was a NATO, he was a U.S. general that at one point was, I think, in charge of NATO or very high up in NATO. Russia launched 86 drones overnight. Ukraine's air defense shot down or suppressed 71 of them. Footage of a Ukrainian Air Force F-16AM Fighting Falcon shooting down a Russian attack drone with AIM-9 Sidewinder. So, but they're not hitting everything, and there is some damage, and we do see the damage. Another night attack on Kyiv aimed at residential buildings. Drone debris fell in multiple locations in Kyiv after air defense interceptions. Ukraine's defense minister Shmyhal says Ukraine plans to deploy 1,000 interceptor drones daily. Russian drone attacks hit a record of 805 in a single night, and that was a month or 2 ago. But yeah, 1,000 daily. Okay, so that's good. But there's a problem here. The challenge is not production. Production isn't the limiting factor. The challenge is deploying radar and AI systems and figuring out where they're supposed to be deployed in order to get them. Remember, they're defending a country the size of Texas. It's very hard. It's very hard to figure out where they're going and then deploy the right defense. Today, Ukrainian city of Kherson is being hit daily by hundreds of Russian drones. A year ago, the region was attacked by about 700 drones per month. Now that number has risen to 2,700 in a week. In August alone, Russians carried out almost 10,000 drone strikes across Kherson region. And here we're talking about the human safari. We're talking about targeting civilians. So living next to the enemy has forced Kherson residents to adopt survival rules, checking Telegram channels for alerts before leaving home, walking only under trees or along walls, watching both the sky and the ground to avoid mines. When driving, they keep their windows open so that they can hear the buzzing of drones. Yeah, these are civilians being targeted by Russians. Meanwhile, there are about 20,000 Cubans fighting for Russia in Ukraine, according to Suppline intelligence reports. Yeah, so U.S. Florida representatives warned at an 18 September briefing that Cuba also helps Moscow evade sanctions with China and Iran and North Korea. So, yeah, there's that. And Kim Jong-un is turning to AI drones, calling them a top priority. At a plant in Pyongyang, the North Korean dictator personally oversaw a test of new drones, according to state media. Inspired by the demonstration, Kim immediately ordered an expansion of mass production for military UAVs. Just a week earlier, he supervised tests of new solid fuel engine for intercontinental missiles, hailing it as a major boost to Pyongyang's nuclear capabilities. And here we are with some more. Many experts believe that Russia helps North Korea in developing its unmanned devices program. So, yep, that fun never ends. I talked about Poland yesterday, cutting off the connection between Poland and Belarus and how it could become a bigger thing. Jay in Kyiv comments that Poland is they now understand whose side China is on. And here's an image of the Chinese Silk Road, right? China has become hostage to the war unleashed by Putin. Poland slammed the border with Belarus and cut off Beijing's trade artery worth $25 billion a year. So if they're trying to go around, if they're trying to go through Kazakhstan, they can keep doing that trade that way. But if they go around it and go through Europe and then through Poland into Belarus into China, that's cut off. So yesterday, I talked about Russia, about Solovyov, and he might be in trouble. He kind of gave away where the drone forces headquarters was in just outside Moscow. Russian secret drone base location revealed in a poorly censored propaganda video. Well, Kyiv Post is now covering that. I talked about it yesterday here in this video about Solovyov is on thin ice and the mistakes that could topple him. Just now, Trump blocked a $400 million in military aid package to Taiwan as he attempts to negotiate trade deal with China. The people familiar with the matter said that the package would have been more lethal than past rounds of aid to Taiwan, but he's doing that, and I thought, oh, that's really odd, right? Like the whole idea, the whole premise of why you're not helping Ukraine is that you're helping China. But American doctrine looks like it might be shifting to the American hemisphere. And, okay, can't arm Ukraine because we need to focus on China. Can't arm Taiwan because we need to focus on Venezuela. What? Venezuela? This is Trump nixed this $400 million Taiwan aid package and future arms sales. Yeah, they're focusing on Venezuela. My very next video, go watch it when it comes out at about 1 o'clock today. I just talked to someone who's been tracking this. Preston Stewart does the same kind of thing that I do, but he is much broader than I am. He'll talk about Ukraine and Russia, but he'll also be talking about other conflicts all around the world much more readily. And he's been tracking what's going on in Venezuela. It was a brilliant conversation. It'll help you understand what's going on there. Okay. Miracle in Ukraine. Defender of Mariupol survived 3 years as a Russian POW with a bullet lodged near his heart. After he returned home as a prisoner exchange, the bullet was successfully extracted by surgeons in Kyiv. That's just amazing. Look at that. Bullet was near his heart. How about that? All right, my friends, I don't have anything more except for my shout out, and this goes to Wong T. Wong T is an undergraduate YouTube member. Thank you, Wong, for your support, and thanks to all of you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.